have everything else in place, and if the portfolio isn't strong, then it's just not going to be a good fit.
Hello from the AIA North Carolina Center for Architecture and Design, and welcome to this episode of Talking to the Wall, presented by Thinc Strategy. Talking to the Wall is a series of vlog episodes in which we answer questions that it seems no one wants to answer, much less talk about. I'm Walt Teague. I was a practicing architect for 33 years, and now I'm creative director for Thinc Strategy. Our topic for today is hiring and hiring practices. We have an outstanding guest with us here today to answer this question, Melanie Reddrick. Melanie is a practicing architect. She's studio principal with Little. She is the 2023 treasurer of AIA North Carolina. Melanie, thank you very much for being here to talk about this important question.
I'm glad to be here. Very important question.
So the question is, what are the most important considerations affecting hiring decisions?
Well, at least for Little, we look for trainability. We definitely have a certain number of core skills that we really want people to have. We want them to be comfortable learning computer software. We want them to be comfortable with just kind of general building organization, confident designers. But really, we want people who are excellent collaborators, excellent communicators. And I really can't emphasize enough the ability to work with other people in a pleasant environment, in a collaborative way is just critical.
So things have changed in the last few years. How's the landscape for hiring design professionals changing? How has it changed?
Well, at the time of this interview, this recording, architecture is very, very busy. So it's very low unemployment, and everyone is just really occupied with a lot of interesting projects, and that's just across the board. So we found, in terms of the pipeline of new students coming out of school into the profession, they're high quality. There's a lot of competition to get the brightest and the best of the students that are coming out. We found that we're still actually seeing the effects of the 2008, 2009 recession in terms of that kind of age group that left the profession in droves.
It's that lost generation.
It's that lost generation. So when it comes to a group of architects with kind of a solid range of experience that would have been getting licensed or coming into the profession during that time, we found that that's probably our hardest area to recruit. So we found that a lot of times we're recruiting from each other. It's another reason why architecture is a small community, and don't burn bridges, because we're just kind of exchanging people at this point.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the concerns that firms and businesses now have to think about that maybe they didn't have to think about, 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest thing would be hybrid work and flexible work. Pre-pandemic, I don't know if we really thought that architecture could be done en masse in a collaborative way remotely.
I didn't think it would.
I didn't think it could be either. And I also teach architecture as well. And when the pandemic hit, we're thinking there's no way you can teach an architectural studio online. We did it. And after we did it, we realized, we really do have the tools and the technology available to do a lot of the collaboration virtually.
So currently, I can remember at one time it was salary was a big consideration, but what do benefits and other factors such as balance of work and life and family and that sort of thing, how does that play into these conversations in hiring?
I hear a lot about flexibility in terms of kind of being a young parent. I remember myself when I was a young parent, I actually left the profession for about 4 to 5 years because I knew the architecture was so demanding, and I knew that for me, the demands of parenting and practicing at the time weren't compatible. So I came back to the profession when my children were in preschool. Now I believe that, I mean, there are a lot of people who don't want to have to make that decision,
Hmm.
and they shouldn't have to.
Hmm.
So I believe that that flexibility in terms of schedule is really important to a lot of architects, especially that magic kind of young architect group that we're
Hmm.
working to recruit, then they're building young families. I believe that there is a real focus on family time, on being present for the
Hmm.
children.
Hmm.
So that really necessitates a flexible work
Yeah.
schedule, and I believe that firms are accommodating it.
Well, and I think there's been a tremendous change there because I can remember, and here I sound like the old guy in the room, which I am. Um, when they're when I first started, and you couldn't have those kind of conversations. It was
Mhm.
like, we've got work to do, and oh, okay, you've got little kids, so what? Still got to
Right,
get done
right,
somehow.
right.
So it's a welcome change.
It's a welcome change, and I think a lot of that change also comes from the change in the balance of the profession. Where when I was starting school, maybe about 25% of the students were female,
Hmm.
and now it's more than 50%.
Hmm.
So I believe as our architecture firms become more balanced between fathers and mothers
Yes.
taking care of children, that it's becoming just really a more uniform demand. And even in my studio, I think a lot of the young parents who need that time off are males.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you evaluate qualifications and experience when you're looking at candidates?
Well, one thing that should comfort a lot of right out of school job seekers, we're not really looking at GPAs, we're not really looking at grades, really hardly at all.
Yeah.
So we're looking for, work experience is wonderful.
Yeah.
So we look at the types of firms that
Hmm.
people have worked in. We look at the type of work, type of projects that they've done to see if they correlate with the types of projects we do. We look at longevity at different firms. We're not necessarily looking for you've been there 10 years, or we're just making sure that we don't see a series of 8 month 10-month stints at lots of different companies. And I believe that the portfolio is probably the most important determinant. Well, it's the most important determinant in terms of who comes in for the interview.
Hmm.
Once you're in for the interview, we already like your qualifications. We're already impressed with your portfolio. We want to hear how you talk about your work because that's how you're going to talk about the work you do
I'm
with
glad you
us.
brought that up because I was going to ask, what role does the portfolio play now? Is
Yeah.
it still as strong of a role?
The portfolio is absolutely critical.
Hmm.
You can have everything else in place, and if the portfolio isn't strong, then it's just not going to be a good fit.
And I guess that depends on the position that they're interviewing for, would it not? I guess.
That's a good question. I would say that the portfolio needs to be strong for whatever position that they're advocating for
Yeah.
or applying for.
Yeah.
I would say that if we did see a portfolio that didn't have strong design, even if they're going for a technical role, that is going to be a more challenging sell.
Uh-huh.
But a person with a portfolio that isn't as strong, because I think a lot of it is a strong portfolio isn't necessarily just about a person that does a lot of amazing design, because
Hmm.
over the course of a architectural education, you've done dozens of projects. Your portfolio could be just your top three or four best, but I think it's really about how do you curate your work? What care do you take in
Hmm.
curating your work?
Hmm.
And can you tell a visual story with your work? So, if those things are in place, we know that you'll be able to translate that into the work that you do for our company.
Excellent. Excellent. So here's a challenging question, and I always found it to be difficult, and that's, how do you know when to hire?
Okay, so when to hire, at least at my company, it's a very data driven decision.
Yeah.
So what we do is we look at our backlog, we look at our projections,
Hmm.
and then we kind of calculate, okay, based on our backlog and projections, how many people should be working here?
Yeah.
And it's so busy and so wonderful right now that, we look and say we could hire 6 people right now. So that's how we make our decisions. Even if we feel like we might want to make a strategic hire, we always look at the data first. And in terms of who to hire, I do think there are a lot of different roles in an architectural firm and even in architectural studios. So, a lot of it is just making sure you have the right balance between young talent, between senior talent, between designers, between technical architects and project managers. But it's all driven by the metrics of the work in the house.
So where do you go now to find candidates, to find new hires?
Mhm.
It's gotten more difficult.
It has, a lot of us actually teach
Hmm.
part-time, including myself. So, one great way to find new hires is to be in the schools and be involved in the schools, even if it's at a kind of review level. One other thing that our firm has done, we've really capitalized on the IPAL program. So
Hmm.
that stands for Integrated Path to Architectural Licensure.
Hmm.
So that's a big commitment, but it really does help to just kind of build that relationship as the person's going through school. So we're on our third IPAL student. They start as second year students with us and they work part-time all the way through school. Before they go into their graduate program, they work with us for a full year. And then by the time that they've graduated, they've taken tests, they've completed a lot of their experience hours, and the goal is that they will join you as a full time employee, a licensed architect with a master's degree. So it's really been a great way not only to find and commit to new talent,
Hmm.
but also to build that loyalty between that person and the firm.
That's an outstanding program, so I'm glad that you talked about that. So where else would you go though? Let's just say if the firm doesn't have the benefit of a school of architecture nearby, where would you go?
One thing that we've participated in, and I would recommend for any firm, especially firms that are working to build a more diverse workforce, is through the National NOMA chapter. They have what they call a HBCU kind of
Hmm.
virtual
Hmm.
career fair, where as a firm we had the opportunity to interview 16 students in an afternoon from HBCUs all over the country. And some of them, we could bring on as interns, some of them we could bring on as full time employees. But the idea of that virtual job fair, I wonder if more kind of architecture firms will start to take on that model because traveling to the career fairs, it kind of limits you geographically. And as more people are working in a hybrid fashion, there's less of a reason to be tied to geography as you're recruiting. It can be very expensive and time consuming for firms to do a lot of traveling. So I'm excited about the possibility of doing more hybrid interviewing.
Excellent, excellent. Are there some other resources perhaps that you would recommend that individuals go to?
I would say that a lot of the local AIA
Uh-huh.
chapters do have job boards that they
Yep.
post. And I would say that that is also a really great way to get kind of the cross firm.
Hmm.
When you post to AIA, you know that the people who are really active in the architectural community are seeing what you're posting, and you can get a lot of good candidates that way.
So we have some of those links that Melanie just made reference to. We're showing them here for you today, the AIA, those and the postings. So let's wrap this up. And I know you already answered this question once, but I want to re-emphasize
Sure.
it, which was the question of this episode of Talking to the Wall. What are the most important considerations affecting hiring decisions? Can you concisely summarize that?
Sure. I think the most important things affecting hiring decisions would be making sure a person's a good cultural fit, making sure that a person is a very collaborative person, and also that they have a strong portfolio. And that strong portfolio is more important than grades. So that should comfort a lot of the students coming right out of school.
Very good. So now you have the answer to that question. Thank you so much, Melanie, for being here and for this episode of Talking to the Wall.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Thank you all for watching this episode of Talking to the Wall. We would like to invite you to like and subscribe to all of these Talking to the Wall episodes. There are a number of these, each one of them exploring different questions, answering different questions. So this, once again, thank you for being here. This is brought to you by Thinc Strategy. Thinc Strategy is based here in North Carolina, but we provide business strategic planning for design and construction professionals throughout the United States. Thank you.
Thank you.